Well, welcome everyone to our monthly Ask the Expert. Well, this month is really going to be Ask the Experts. And I am so super excited because we've been doing this series since the beginning of the new year. I just felt led that there are a number of children who were born during the pandemic or right before the pandemic, and parents are beginning to see things that we don't necessarily want them to experience yet, meaning that there are some delays that we're seeing. And we want to get to the place where our children thrive. And I am blessed that I have two amazing speakers. And when I say amazing, you'll understand because anytime you have people who have walked a journey, that by itself makes them an expert. There is nothing you can speak to a parent about who knows their child. And my goal as an organization exists to support families facing autism and other intellectual disabilities. But my vision has always been to empower and educate. And the more you know, the better informed you are, and the greater power you have to be able to exert support for your loved ones. So I am so thankful to have two amazing people who are part of what I call the My Goal family. So my goal has been doing support groups and educations since 2008. And on my own personal journey in getting services and support, I really felt that it was important and critical to have the education and the knowledge to ensure that I am getting the right support for my loved one. And along the journey, God enabled me to meet some really great people, some who are parents themselves. So two of the individuals who today will be presenting for us are two of our own. Aderonke Aisagbonhi is an amazing parent of three wonderful people, young people. One of them, her son Daniel, was diagnosed, and I use the word was because it doesn't define who Daniel is. And I've seen how amazing Daniel is, and she's going to share a little bit of her own story. But she is educator who has a bachelor's and a master's in sociology and also a master's in special education. She's been working in this field for over 10 years, actually 12 years. But more than that, she's been such a blessing to me personally in terms of support and encouragement. And many a times we do our activities, she's right there. And more than that, she's taking the show on the road. So now she works in the early intervention system. So naturally, when I started this series, I felt that it is just perfect to ask her to speak because she can talk on from the standpoint of someone who does the work and someone who's also walked through the journey herself. Also co-presenting with her today is Shawn Jacobs. Shawn, I've been privileged to travel overseas to Ghana, West Africa, where she's done training for individuals, including parents, healthcare professionals, and teachers. So there's a global component of her education. She's been in the field for over 16 years. And doing this work, Shawn has a bachelor's in psychology and has her master's degree in education with certification in special ed. So naturally, if I know that I have a question about early intervention, she's always one of those people that I will call because she actually does the work hands-on with families. And her focus has always been in the urban areas, so could connect to people in those areas as well. So I am so excited to have these two presenters with us. And it's going to be both a formal and an informal aspect. So if you're watching us live, please drop your questions in YouTube and Facebook. And we want to throw these people on this hot spot and ask them to give us the info. So I'm so excited. And I want to say, ladies, thank you and welcome to As the Expert. And I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us into this conversation. If you're interested in being in the Zoom room with us, please, you can log in. We put the registration info here. So it's bit.ly virtual MyGo register, and we'll send you the link. So we'll love for people to join us. But as we're saying, these folks are here to really help new parents. So anyone that's new to the journey or seeing their child having delays, it's important to really connect to services as early as you can. And we'll learn more from these two wonderful presenters. So I'll turn it over, and I want to say welcome again, Aderonke. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. If you're joining outside the country, I will say good evening to you. My name is Aderonke Aisagbonhi. Thank you very much, Dr. G, and nice to have everyone here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share today. Today we'll be discussing on assessing early intervention. So I will be sharing my part of the journey, and I'll be sharing the first part of this presentation with you. So let's get started. Oh, sorry. There you go. Here, so goals of New Jersey early intervention. Early intervention is that part, it's a system that is in charge of kids with developmental delay from 0 to 3 years. So the goals of early intervention basically is one, meeting the needs of eligible children. So when you see that your child is having any developmental delay, either physically, any way or any at any stage, then you will have to seek out an intervention. Then secondly, the second goal is assisting families in enhancing the development of their children and participating in the individualized family service plan process. So as we go through this presentation, you will get to know some of those things as we go on. And the third goal is that early intervention does not provide medical diagnosis. We are not doctors. So we just help the family, to go through the process of early intervention. So I will move ahead, but as we go on, you'll begin to see more of those words where we're able to expand and expatiate on what they really mean. Here you go, I'm sorry. Early intervention history. Early intervention came about as a progression of special education services. And then many early childhood intervention support services began as research units in universities. So early intervention started from units in the universities. Also, it was developed out of organizations helping older children. In the 1990s, many states in the US put into place a program where the child's pediatrician can recommend a child for early intervention screening and all of that. Also, every state now implement Part C fully. Part C is that part where you have the early intervention, because it's a process, it's a stage. So the Part C is basically the one that takes care of early intervention, which is from 0 to 3 years. In 1989, 22 states or territories had the Department of Education as lead agency. 11 others had the Department of Health. Another 9 had the Department of Human Services, and remaining states had combined departments or Department of Mental Health or Developmental Disabilities. So what we just basically want to give you an idea of how the history came about, how early intervention started. And currently, every state has an early intervention program that is funded by both the federal and state coordinated, most often through the Department of Education or Department of Health. That's where you see the DOE or the DOH. Congress established the Part C, which is the early intervention program, in 1986 in recognition of an urgent and substantial need. So they found that there's a basic need to provide intervention for our children. So number one is to enhance the development of infants and toddlers with disabilities. When you have an intervention, it helps you with the developmental delays, either in the physical stage, which is the physical and the motor, either in the emotional, in cognitive, in any part. Early intervention is provided to help your children in that area. Also, it reduces educational costs by minimizing the need for special education through early intervention, and also minimize the likelihood of institutionalization. Institutionalization has been in the country for, over 1900s. I remember that there was a video that I saw one time in one of my classes where you have people where they keep them in a particular place and they were not properly treated. So early intervention is basically to rule that off so that our children who are going through early intervention services can become part of the society and they are not secluded in a particular place. Also, early intervention also help, to maximize independent living, because when you're able to get started early, when you're able to get intervention started early, it helps our children a long way. And it also helps, it helps them with the basic skills that they need to learn even into adulthood. And also it enhances the capacity of families to meet their child's needs. Oh, I'm sorry. Here you go. How and why does New Jersey early intervention work? I know some of you will have that question, in your mind, like, okay, so how does this work? So early intervention recognizes and respects the important and central role of the family in a child's life. And now this is the very, very important part, family. So that means that family is an important aspect of early intervention. It is very important that when you have a supportive family, when you have, everything that helps the child begins with the family. So that is why that part of the family is very key in early intervention process. The purpose of early intervention is to promote the child and family's ability to meet developmental outcomes chosen by the family and outlined in the individualized family service plan. So basically the family are going to be the one that is going to say, oh, this is where my child is being delayed. This is what I want him or her to be able to achieve in the long run while they are going through early intervention process. So family is very key in whatever thing, whatever stage of life that your child is, whatever outcomes you think you want for your child. Maybe, for example, your child is not working, and when you have the meeting, then you have to discuss, oh, this is what I want my child to be able to achieve in 6 months. Maybe you want the child to be able to run. Maybe you want the child to be able to walk. So these are basically what the family will come up with the practitioners. Child development can be broken into 5 stages. So the first stage is the newborn, which is between 0 to 3 months. The second stage is the infant stage, which is from 3 months until 12 months. And the third stage is the toddler stage, which is from 1 to 3 years. The fourth one is the preschool age from 3 to 4 years. And the last one is the school age, where you have them from 4 years to 5 years old. What are the 5 areas of development in early childhood early intervention addresses? So we want to check that and see how early intervention can help our families. The first part is the cognitive development. So with the cognitive development, we're talking about exploration and discovery. We're talking about memory. We're talking about problem solving. We're talking about imitation and symbolic play. And we go over to the physical development, which includes the vision and hearing. So with the physical development, you're talking about the gross motor, which has to do with the whole body. You're talking about the fine motor, which has to do with the fingers, what they can explore with their hands. And you're talking about the physical health and well-being of our children. And we go over to the third one, which is the communication development. So we want to check how they're able to listen and understand, how they're able to process information. And you want to see how they're communicating, how they're speaking, and as well, how they are listening to whatever you say to them. And lastly, you want to check emergent literacy. How much words do they have? Also, we go to the next one, which is the social or emotional development. So in this particular stage, you check for, trust, you check for how they're doing emotionally, how they're able to handle stress, how they are able to do a lot of those things. So those are the things that early intervention will address. And to the last one, which is the adaptive development, you want to see how they are able to adapt to their environment, and also things that has to do with the basic skills that they need to learn, the activities of daily living and things like that, like bathing, like brushing and things like that. All right. What is the system of payment and family cost participation? So that basically means that early intervention is based on your family income. So for families whose income is less than 3 times the federal poverty level, will receive early intervention services at no cost. So if you're able to provide, your pay stubs or any, financial information to your service coordinator, we will be working with you while in early intervention, they will provide you with a form that basically will check how much you're earning per family. So that will determine if you're going to get the service for free or you have to have a copay. We have families, we have a smaller portion that they pay every month. We have families who don't even pay at all. So all the things depend on your family's financial situation. So how do I apply for early intervention in New Jersey? So if you suspect that an infant or your toddler may be experiencing developmental delays, you contact Early Intervention System at 888-653-4463. So the call is toll-free for New Jersey residents. Other states also have their own similar number. So when you call this number, they might have you might not have anyone to be able to talk to you, but they will ask you to leave some information about your child, and they will definitely contact you depending on the county where you live. Some are faster to get in touch with you. Some would take about 2-3 business days. But I know that when I used to live in Newark, it took about 3 days. When we moved out of town and we moved to Middlesex County, it was faster. Like it was just like a day. So depending on wherever you live, so that would determine, how soon you get called back. Steps in the early intervention process. So we'll be talking about from number 1 until number 8, and we're going to be able to expatiate and talk more also with my partner. The first one is the identification or referral process. The second one is the parental consent, the assessment, the evaluation. And the third process is the initial individualized family service plan, which I've talked before, so we'll be able to talk more on that. The fourth one is the individualized family service plan services provided. The fifth one is the IFSP review and the revision. And number 6 is the IFSP annual review. Number 7 is transition. And number 8 is the exit. So these things we'll be discussing as we go on. Step 1, an infant or toddler may have a developmental delay or disability. Now, each state has a referral system to ensure that infants and toddlers suspected of having a developmental delay or disability can easily be referred to early intervention system. I know that when my children were growing up, especially my first child who's on the spectrum was growing up, it was actually the pediatrician who, after you go for a visit, I think it was it was a 24-month visit. They will give you a form to complete, on the computer, where you have to, answer the questions, and which will highlight, the stage where your child is. So when they see that the child is not living up to expectation, then they will be the one to refer you, say, oh, you can call an intervention, and then you can go from there. So there are 2 main ways that children are connected with early intervention. Number 1 is the primary referral sources, such as the physician, like I mentioned before, my child's pediatrician, and hospitals and other programs refer the child to the early intervention program through the state's referral, depending on whoever you're able to, contact first, if it's your pediatrician or whoever can help you, or refer you to the program. And the second one is parents can contact the early intervention program directly, which is sometimes called child find in the state, and ask that their infant or toddler be evaluated. You can also pick you can pick the phone and call them up. It doesn't hurt. If you see that maybe the visit with the doctor is over, or you are noticing any changes in your child, call as soon as you can. Pick the phone up and call them. So then you follow the prompts, to leave a message like I discussed earlier. The step 2 is determining eligibility, and we'll talk about BDI too. So BDI is Battelle Developmental Inventory 2. So parental consent is needed before the child may be evaluated. Now, this is the thing: when they want to determine eligibility for your child, you will have, after the call, then they will contact you, to seek, for your consent, if you want them to come to your home, to evaluate your child. So child is evaluated in the 5 major developmental areas that I've talked about before: the cognitive, the physical, the social emotional, the adaptive, and the emotional, and the communication. So those are the areas that the practitioners will come into your home and assess your child. So what BDI basically is that it will test for the strength of the child and the weakness of the child. So when they're able to arrive at the raw score, and they're able to check for the mean score, so those are the numbers that they will look at. The practitioner, the evaluators, or the examiners are the one who will do this kind of test and assessment for your child to see where they belong and where they lack and where they will need help. And also they will provide you with some basic strategies that can help you at that moment before proceeding into the early intervention process. So it's not that they're going to give you the diagnosis. They are just there to assess and see for every stage, in physical, in emotional, where is your child? And they will check for the strength in order to balance up with the weakness, the other part. So that is what they will do with the BDI. So child is evaluated in the 5 major developmental areas to A, if he or she meets the state definition of delay or disability. So they will check and see. So developmental delay means at a minimum, a delay of either 33% in one developmental area or 25% in 2 or more developmental areas. Or if appropriate, standardized instruments are individually administered in the evaluation process. A score of at least 2.0 standard deviations below the mean in one functional area, or a score of at least 1.5 standard deviations below the mean in each of 2 functional areas. And this is the thing, when these practitioners or examiners come into your home, they're going to break this thing down to you. So it's going to be a natural environment where they will assess your child and bring things in that your child is going to play with. Then they will have this interview, they will have a structured environment, even in your home, they will have the interview, and they will have the ones that they need to observe by themselves. So those are the 3 things that they will have to, put together that will determine the scores. 2 is also to determine the child's eligibility for early intervention services. So because with this BDI, it's kind of tricky because you have a couple of kids who are stronger in an area and they are not in the other area. So it depends on, whichever examiner or how they are able to assess the natural environment or your child, which will basically determine if your child will be eligible for early intervention services. Some kids are good in social personnel, but they are not good in communication. Some are good in receptive. Some are not good in expressive. So they're going to bring everything together to determine if a child will need early intervention services. So the evaluation and assessment process must be completed within 45 days of the child being referred to the early intervention program. So this test must be done as soon as, within 45 days of your call, in order to see where your child is and to be able to access the intervention that the child needs. All right. So here you have the green, which says that the child is eligible. Then a meeting is scheduled to develop an IFSP. We talked about the IFSP the other time, which is family centralized. So that means the family will be able to come up with outcomes that will help the child on the journey, because we know that children, they do better when they're in their natural environment. So it's the family that will be able to keep up. Oh, this is what I want from my child. This is what I want my child to be able to achieve in a short time. So you're going to be working together with practitioners, with child development specialists, with other practitioners too, depending on whatever your child is found eligible for. So you're going to be working together on developing this IFSP. Now, the other one, which is the red X, is the child is found not eligible. So parents are informed in writing of that determination and their right to dispute it. If you know that, my child is not eligible, and I feel like you have a strong feeling that your child he or she needs help in one particular area, then you are able to dispute it. You can come, they can also we've had situations where a child was not eligible before, but parents feel strongly that they need services. And after a few months, they call back and they came back again to assess the child and see where the child is. So it depends on, it depends on the parent, but if you feel you have that strong feeling that, no, my child is not where she's supposed to be, please call them back and they will be glad to assess the child again. So I will hand over to my partner, Shawn.
Yes, I will continue. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again and having us here. We are excited to present to you what we know and also just feel so passionate about. So continuing along with this idea of the individualized family service plan, which is the IFSP. In case you haven't figured out already, early intervention has a lot of jargon and a lot of technical words that mean very simple things. So the individualized service family plan is just that. It's a plan that's developed with our parents in mind or our guardians in mind. And it helps us determine what services we can put in place, right? So one thing about early intervention is it's not an expert-driven field. What do I mean by that is we're not considered the experts. We are professionals, but we're not the experts. We consider our families and those who are with the child most as the experts. So we're taking our feedback and cues from you as parents to help us develop this document. And before any meetings of the IFSP are scheduled, you will always receive this very key term called prior written notice. It's something you're going to hear all throughout your special education journey. It's prior written notice. And prior written notice is very important. And the reason why it's important is because it gives you a reminder of what your rights are as a parent, often referred to as the procedural safeguards. Another thing about the IFSP is that it should be conducted in your native language as much as possible. And I know that that sounds very simple, but for all of you who are watching, people who are joining from different parts of the world, right? If you are here in the United States, your initial language may not be English. English is our quote unquote standard language that we use in education. However, that may not be your native tongue. So we do need to seek as much as possible the ability to communicate in your native tongue. And that includes even when we're doing these evaluations for our children, we seek translation services, we seek interpreters, even as far as sign language is concerned, we will utilize those services. So the next step that we're going to go to is a continuation of step 3, which is really just this idea of what does the IFSP include, right? So there are some things that the IFSP needs to include. One thing we talk about is what is your child doing, right? What are their current levels of development? So we not only want to focus on their delay or what they might not be doing, but we like to look at it from a strength-based perspective. In education, we talk a lot about that because we understand that all children have strengths, regardless to a delay, regardless to a disability, they still have a strength. And so it's very important for us to speak to that, right? The other thing we try to identify is what are the resources and priorities of the family. We mentioned this earlier, but it's very important because a lot of times as experts, you will go to doctors, you will go to other therapists, you will go seeking information, and everyone has a plan for your child, right? But the most important plan is what is the plan that you have for your child? What are your priorities, right? I might want to see that Johnny decides he knows how to use 5 words to request his milk. And for you, it might be important that your child sleeps through the night, right? So that's an important factor. The family IFSP is surrounded on your goals, not ours. Though we can give our input, it's really what's the priority for the family. Next, we want to make sure that the things that we're placing in here are measurable results or outcomes. And what do I mean by that, right? I don't want to say, Susie will learn to say 50 words in a week, because that's probably not practical and it's not even necessarily measurable. How do I know that she did 50 words? How will we all know that, right? So we want to think about the things that we're writing in here. We want them to be practical. We want them to be achievable. And we want to make sure that there's a way that everyone on a team could be accountable for the goals that we create. Early intervention services are appropriate based on the child's needs, right? Again, it's what's significant to that child. What are the things causing the child difficulty in their environment? Not so much what are the things that are causing the adult difficulty, right? Because we as adults have a lot of expectations and they don't always match the expectations of the child. So we're again looking at what makes the most sense for that child, right? Does Malachi really care about reading his story at night before going to bed and sitting on mommy's lap? Maybe not, right? Malachi might just really enjoy watching 10 minutes of TV before going to bed. So, and if that can be done in a peaceful way, then we want to look at how we can merge those together, right? How can we make that child's needs be met? Lastly, we want to look at the settings, right, of where early intervention takes place at. We always want to be sure that we include where are we going to be doing this at? Is it going to be in the home? Is it going to be in daycare? Are we going to be at grandma's? Are we going to be by the nanny? Are we going to go to the park? Those type of things should be itemized in the IFSP. Moving on, because this is a very big step. I will say the IFSP development is probably the biggest step out of all of this because there's so many different components of it. I think you heard it, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, which is something called the natural environment. Early intervention is meant to be provided in what we refer to as the natural environment, right? And you might be thinking, because someone posed this funny question to me the other day, well, then what's the fake environment, right? If we're talking about what's fake to a child. So what we mean by natural environment are the settings that are typical for other children who are the same age, right? That don't present with a disability. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to take a child and single them out. We don't want to make them feel like that their delay or their disability is a punishment, right? We want to be as inclusive as possible. So in prior years in early intervention, and as things have developed over time, we've gotten a lot better. You may have seen a therapist come in a daycare center, take a child out the room, put them in another room, work with them one-on-one. And that's okay, right? For some therapeutic settings. However, our goal is we want your child to participate in the daycare setting. If it's mealtime, we want them to eat with their peers. We want them to use their spoon with their peers. We want them to drink the same water that everyone else is drinking. So our goals when we talk about natural environment is we don't want to single anyone out. We want to make it as normal, quote unquote, as possible, right? Now, however, are there situations where that's not possible? Absolutely. Because remember, early intervention is the natural environment to that child. So there are some children who are in the hospital. There are some children who have terminal illness. There are some children who have a lot of medical regulations, a lot of medical protocol, and those things may have more of an influence on what we would consider the natural environment. Next, we're going to talk about something really big, which is consent. And I know that for all of us, right, who have children, who have, whether we have a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, a 3-month-old, an 18-year-old, right? Consent is a big deal to us because the child, they're ours, right? So I look at this and I always remind all of my families, I always remind my parents that you are in control, right? So you are the one that gives consent, right? For any type of early intervention service that is going to be identified that your child needs. You are the one that decides, yes, this is something I want my child to have, or no, this is something I don't want my child to have. One of the things I also want to point out here is that just because you decide my child does not need OT, right, occupational therapy, but I still want my child to have physical therapy. And you might ask, do I have a right to that? The answer is yes, right? You can consent to some services and still decline other services. Also, you can decide that I don't want physical therapy anymore. My child's doing great. I'd like to revoke my consent. I'd like to take it back, right? Also, you can decide, I decline that service now, but you know what? I'm really thinking my child might benefit from speech after all. I'd like to go ahead and seek that service again. And you're also allowed to do that. So consent is a very important thing because nothing is concrete. And what I mean by that is nothing's in stone. Nothing has to be that you don't want to be because you are in control of the services that happen through early intervention. So our step 4 is, right, early intervention services are provided, right? We come to you, right? It's time to implement all these things that we've written down, all these ideas that we come up with, all the testing that your child has gone through. Now, hopefully it's time to have some fun, right? So each early intervention service is listed in your IFSP has to be available as soon as you give consent, right? So that means that we have an obligation to begin servicing your child. Does that always happen? I would like to tell you yes, but the answer is no sometimes. There are times when services are on hold due to the fact there just isn't availability of a practitioner. What does that mean for you, right? If that happens to be your circumstance? Well, what that means is you have somebody called your service coordinator. Your service coordinator is your single point of contact. This is the go-to person, right? Because you have a whole team of people sometimes. You might have an occupational therapist, you might have a physical therapist, you might have a speech therapist, a developmental interventionist, and that's just a lot, right? So you'd like to have a single point of contact, which is your service coordinator. That is the person who is responsible for ensuring that your services happen. So if this so happens that your services are not immediately provided, that is the person that you will reach out to. That is the person that will ensure you do receive services. And it's also the person that will ensure that services can be provided at a later date of those services that may not have been provided. IFSP review and revision, which is our step 5, right? Which is every 6 months and every year, as you heard mentioned earlier by our lovely Ronke, is that we look at what was happening, right, in your services. How has your child developed? How have they changed? Has the family's priorities changed? And we look to see what do we need to do to continue development. What do we need to change? Do we need to add something? Do we need to take something away? Oftentimes, you may not hear this, but children in early intervention do very well. And we even need to take away services. That child may no longer need speech 2 times a week. They may not require physical therapy twice a week. Now, maybe it's once a month. So this is where this review and revision happens at, right? And we also do something which is our annual review, which is a bit more comprehensive. And it's more comprehensive because we actually reevaluate your child at that point. After a year of being with the early intervention program, your child will be reevaluated through the same process that you went through initially. The evaluation team that's assigned to your case will come out, reassess your child. This information is very important. Sometimes families feel a little intimidated by it, or you're just wondering, is my child still going to get services, or have they gotten quote unquote worse? And what it really does is it's actually the reassessment is to ensure that the services that we're providing are helping your child. It's really not just about how well your child is doing, but also how well are the services that we're providing for your child. So it's an assessment not only for your child, but for us as the practitioners. So it's definitely a very key component of what we do. So I'll continue a little more. As we mentioned prior, you still have to have prior written notice. So that means all of these meetings, again, whether it's a 6-month review, whether it's an evaluation, you will receive prior written notice. You will receive something in writing that gives us permission to go ahead and do the reevaluation, which allows us to set up that appointment. So no one's going to come to your house unannounced and say, hello, we're here to assess your child. No, it's not going to happen, right? Because you are in control. You can decide, I don't want my child reassessed at this point. I want to end services at this point, and we will do that for you. So you're always, as the parent, as the guardian, in control of what happens with your early intervention services. So moving into step 6, which I kind of got to a little bit sooner, which is our annual review, which is pretty much, as I said, everything is done over, right? We look at everything, and sometimes our children hit the target. They're doing great. and it's time for them, to move on, right? And they no longer need early intervention services. Other times that may not be the case, and it's time for us to add some more things. We need to add some more goals. We want to just re-strategize. Sometimes we add new members to the team. So there's a lot of options here that happen during the annual review. So this is a very, very important meeting for us in early intervention. Our step 7, which is our transition plan, is really important. And the reason, and I know I've said a lot of things are really important, but that's because I'm also biased. I love early intervention. But the transition plan is really about what's going to happen with your child after early intervention, right? What's going to happen when they leave us, right? So early intervention, as you mentioned, only goes to the age of 3 years old. So once your child is 3, they're no longer a part of early intervention, right? So this is a plan that should occur 90 days prior. We should have a plan in place of what we are doing with your little one, right? So what does that mean? It means that there's several options, right, to have this plan put in place. And different families will choose different things based on what their family goals are, what they feel the needs of their child is. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's simply the fact that as an early intervention team, it's our job to ensure your child isn't just left hanging once they turn 3. We need to know that we've come to a conclusion about your child's development and have met the family's needs at that time, right? So we hold something called a transition plan conference. And this conference can be held even up to 9 months prior, but typically it's around the 3 months prior to the 3rd birthday. And the reason for that is sometimes families are still really unsure about the path that they want to go after early intervention. So they may delay that until it's close to the 3rd birthday as possible. So what are some options, right? If you're in this step 7 here with me and you're looking at transition planning, what can you do with your child? So if your child still qualifies, they can be referred for preschool services under Part B of the IDEA law, right? And that's our Individuals with Education Act, right? So they can, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So they can still receive services, but not through early intervention. That would be through the preschool services part of our Part B. They can go through the elementary school or preschool services for children participating under an extended Part C option. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're in another state, your early intervention may not end at the age of 3. Your early intervention may end at the age of 4 or 5. Depending on what state you're in, there are different age ranges, but your services do not stop. There are preschool programs that accommodate children who are older than 3, but still fall under the early intervention umbrella. So each state's laws are slightly different. So if you aren't joining from New Jersey, you do need to go on your Department of Education website and look for the specific details. But a lot of these most actually laws are covered under the federal law, but they do vary in terms of how they're implemented from state to state. You also may choose an early Head Start program, a typical preschool program that has nothing to do with any type of services. You may decide, my child's ready for KinderCare, my child's ready for TLC, my child's ready for Bright Horizons, or whatever, Kiddie Academy, whatever program that you just feel like your kid is ready to be enrolled in, right? So they may not receive any services past their 3rd birthday. Or there's also other appropriate services. What do I mean by that? You might decide that, and I think we've even heard this a little bit on Dr. Marola's presentation, you might decide, I just want outside services or quote unquote outpatient. What do I mean by that? I just want services of an occupational therapist or a private speech therapist. I want to go through my insurance. I don't want to deal with the school district. I don't want anyone in my home. Those are all choices that you as a parent have, but they're all very important conversation for our transition planning conference. So the point is we want to make sure that we're having that conversation, right? And we want to have it a bit earlier than later so that we can ensure that there is continuity of services if that's desired. Step 8, which I think is probably the scariest part of the early intervention process once you've already gotten into early intervention, which is you exit us, you exit early intervention. And it's like, well, you guys have been my family for the last 2 years, because as early intervention providers, we become your family. We're there, we're having phone conferences, we meet grandma, we know the daycare center, we know your favorite diner. Sometimes services have been provided at a birthday party with the family. So it can be a very scary time. But it's also a very exciting time because it's a new beginning for your child. Your child's entering a different stage, right? Because in state of New Jersey, as I mentioned, I say state of New Jersey here because there are different age ranges in your particular states that you may be joining us from. But by age 3, you do exit out of the Part C of early intervention program, right? And that's where you've made your decision at. So we will close your case. And then you are no longer a part of early intervention. You are now on your own, quote unquote, but you're also in partnership with the necessary resources that we've hopefully been able to link you to. I just included some little sample session images, right, of what early intervention might look like. And the reason why, we put these images here was just to give you an idea that early intervention is a very broad, it's a very broad process. You can do it in a daycare center. You can have it at a gym location. You can do it on your couch. You might do it in, a particular home, grandma's home. These are just some little things that you might see if you were to watch an early intervention session, just to give you an idea of what it would look like. And so finally, we get to our typical early intervention session. Like, what does that look like, right? So I'm going to try to give you an idea what that looks like as best as I can, right? So I have some brief bullet points here, which first, you have to be scheduled, right? So we always have a schedule, which will be scheduled prior to our arrival. Second, we're going to use the natural environment, right? Which includes your toys, your materials, unless you request. Sometimes we have families that say, hey, my kid is bored. Can you bring me something? And we'll do that as well most of the time. Location is flexible, right? Like there's no specific place it has to happen. It doesn't have to be at the table. It doesn't have to be on the floor. It doesn't have to be on the couch. Wherever you prefer is where that session will happen at. It's 50 minutes of guided play, right? So what do I mean by guided play? What I mean by guided play is the child is actually engaging with toys. So it'll look like they're playing, but the key word here is guided, which means that as the adult, as the therapist, as the practitioner, and I'll use those words interchangeably because you'll also hear them interchangeably, is that I have in mind, what do I want this child to learn? What am I working on while they're using this activity, right? To address the goals that you've identified in your IFSP. Lastly, the last 10 minutes will be a discussion with the family to discuss the child's progress. What are the strategies that we're using to implement? How are we able to increase your child's development? And finally, you'll sign and say, yes, I agree. The services were provided the way I expect them to be provided and by who I expected them to be provided by. And you'll either sign electronically or through a traditional paper and pen. And there are some questions here at the end. These are some frequently asked questions. And of course, we're open to take more, but just, a head start here, like where will my services take place at, right? Well, they pretty much can take place anywhere you'd like them to place at, as long as they're within the county that you live in. Services cannot take place generally outside of the county that you live in, and that has to do with something called, a big word, jurisdiction. And what that means is that services are authorized and regulated under a specific county. So that is why that parameter is placed there. What are the qualifications of the therapist? Well, all therapists will have a 4-year degree. They will also have a minimum of 3 to 5 years of experience with children birth to 3 years old. How much services can my child receive? Well, that's a very individualized question, and that will depend a lot on the family, what the child's development is, what the availability of the therapists are on that team, what has the child's assessments come up with in terms of development and developmental needs, what's appropriate, what can the child tolerate. So the answer is not generic. So some kids may have 2 times a month and another child may have 5 times a week. Right. So it's a very individualized, it's not a cookie cutter response there. And lastly, I'll answer, what will I need for therapy sessions? Right. Most of us ask that you just provide us with a quiet place that's easy for us to regulate your child. And we also ask that the services take place in distraction free. What do I mean by distraction free? Usually we mean, please do not have your child using the iPad or the TV before services. Please make sure they ate, make sure they slept. Those are the type of things that we would like for our therapy session. And I will stop and let our wonderful host take over. Dr. G, back to you.
All right. I had myself muted, and it's a good thing because I'm like, wow, this is a lot of information. Great job. I learned a lot from you both just from listening here and listening to this presentation. You talked about a lot, and I'm going to allow folks who are in here who have questions to ask their questions. So I just want some clarity on something in terms of helping me break it down. So I'm concerned that my child is developmentally delayed, meaning that they're not doing everything else like their cousins are doing. And if you have more than one child, you're like, wait, I'm seeing that this person is not maybe having eye contact, maybe they're tiptoeing, maybe they're lining up their toys, maybe they're doing really flapping their finger, flapping their arms. And most of us notice that they're not talking, right? So I go to see my pediatrician. I'm just telling my story kind of way. My pediatrician said, call early intervention. They give you a prescription. That's what they give me here, early intervention. So I'm thinking I'm going to get some pill that's going to magically make my child talk now, right? And I call this number and you said it can take up to a week. I'm like, wow, a week for somebody to answer a phone, but hey, we'll take what it is. So once I make that phone call, you said somebody's going to come into my home and do an evaluation. And you talked about a couple of people, an OT, a speech, physical therapy. And then, okay, then they give their report. I'm eligible. Okay, great, wonderful. Somebody's going to fix my child. You guys are going to fix my child. Because when you walk into my house, you're going to play, you do whatever it is you're going to do. And I'm going to go about cooking and do my thing that I need to do. But you're telling me that it's a family activity, family service, individualized family service plan. A lot of lingos, like Ms. Jacob said. Now, where I got confused a little bit is, then all of a sudden you talk about a therapist. So there's only one person? And you're saying play. They come into my house to play with my child all day. I mean, like 1 hour, maybe twice a month. Can you help me a little bit? I know I'm exaggerating, folks, here, but I think it's an important point because the child is not talking. Yet I have somebody coming into my house who is not a speech therapist. And yet they did an evaluation. So really help us to kind of understand, how does this differ from all the other hospital or medical-based type of specific piece? And either one of you can take that question.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that question. So I'm just going to share a little bit, then I will hand over to Shawn. Okay. So basically with my employer, we come into your home, we'll play, the family watch, right? And we show you and share the strategies that you can carry over as soon as we leave. So at the outset of every session of every kid that I start intervention with, I tell the parent, I have a one-on-one discussion. For a long time. So I basically set out the expectation at the beginning, because I would like you to understand that I am not here to fix your child. So I am only here either for 1 hour a week. So that means for a week, that's a long time. I'm just there for 1 hour a week, for example. So you are basically with the child most of the time. So I will show you the strategies that can help, like modeling, the imitation, some skills that you can help, that can carry over. And I will make you understand also that some of those things do not have to typically be when you're playing with toys. You can do it while you're in the kitchen. You can do it while you're in the laundry room. You can do some of these things. So I will help you understand so many ways. Even when you go outside, there's so many things that the kids can learn from. So it doesn't have to be the basic structured play, but it can be carried over all over, anywhere, in as much as it's a natural environment. So I make you understand such that when I come the next time, you are able to share. I also start with that too on my next session. So any new thing, anything new that you want to learn, you have any question, I basically make them understand that I'm not here to fix your child. It is what you do. That is why I decide to emphasize on the word family, because that is the key part. That is where we start. You are the one. You basically have to have that time for your child. We're not fixing any child here, but it's what I prefer to you, whatever advice that I give to you that's going to help your child in the long run. So, I mean, that is one of the difference. That's what my employer do. They make you understand that I'm not there, you can do it. Because we see situations where I've had a client who told me, I took over from one of my coworker, and she said to me, "Oh, are you one of those people who come and tell me what to do with my child?" And I had to re-explain and set it out for her, like, I'm not here to fix your child, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. But when you watch what I do in the first session, I want you to be able to independently carry these things over, so that will help you even when the practitioner called out, or you're sick, or the other person is sick, so that you are doing what you're supposed to do with your child. And I assure that you are going to see changes, because I've seen it work for families. And also, every child is different. That is one thing that I also try to emphasize on. What you see with A, you see A not talking at the beginning, the pickup. You see B not talking. I mean, there are so many things, because even at the onset, when they have this assessment, you have this, they have targeted evaluation team. When they come in, they see some things and they will refer you at one point to a developmental pediatrician, depending on what they see. So all these things will determine if your child, whatever your child would need in the long run, and also what you as a parent are able to do while the intervention is going on. I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Yes, you did part of it. Maybe Shawn will add to that. So what happens to the speech therapist and the OT? Did they just disappear?
Yeah, I love this because a lot of times when families call early intervention, or when they've been referred even to early intervention, they think there's a magic pill, like you mentioned, in joking. And the idea is, a lot of people think speech therapists, or I will definitely use speech, I'll pick on speech at the moment, have a magic pill to get the child to talk, right? So they assume my child needs speech. I want speech 5 times a week. And the truth of the matter is that there's a reason why they send in what, Ranke just mentioned, is a team of evaluators. And one of the things that they do is they say, you know what, who's the best therapist that can accomplish the most with this child and this family? So in terms of communication, especially speech, and I love this one because speech is like our mile marker, I guess you want to say, in terms of development. It helps us really see how kids are doing because it's more obvious. And one of the things that people will tend to say is, okay, I just want my child to talk, and my child's talking and they're fine. But the reality is there's a lot of prerequisite skills that go into getting a child to talk. There's a lot of prerequisite skills that go into getting a child to write, which is where you would come in with maybe occupational therapist at, or even getting the child to walk up and down stairs, right? So a lot of times, the first therapist that most families will see will be me, or Ranke, which is a developmental interventionist. And the reason for that is we lay the foundation. We put in a lot of the skills that are necessary for children to learn other skills later by other experts, which are our speech therapists, our physical therapists, our occupational therapists. So our goal is to come in and really, I guess you will say, stabilize the child, right? And stabilize the family. Once we lay that strong foundation where children can attend, children begin to follow directions, children begin to imitate actions, children stay in one place for a little bit longer than usual, that is the point where oftentimes we'll then say, hey, you know what? I think the child might be ready for some other services. So that's our goal, is almost to do a little bit of damage control so that we set the team up in general for success. So that's not to say there aren't times where an occupational therapist could very well be the first person on a team, or a physical therapist. If you have a child with Down syndrome, for example, a lot of times the first therapist you will see will be a physical therapist. And so it really depends on the child, which therapist is going to be able to stabilize the child the best and the home the best. And then other members of the team will be added as needed. I love that question.
No, thank you. That was really well done. Thank you both for that, because we want to set expectations. And I thank you both so much for presenting this, because a lot of us are overwhelmed. Our child, we're looking at our neighbor, the neighbor's kids are doing well, and we get jealous because we're seeing them. I'm just keeping it real here, right? You see it like, why can't my child do the same, right? And so we're looking for the panacea or the quick fix. But what we determined from early intervention is that it's one of the first gateway entry into a long-term process of helping your child, meaning that you as a parent are going to be more of an active participant, not a passive participant. Many of us are used to sending our kids to daycare. We drop them off and we pick them up and say, what happened at the day? Oh, you learned da, 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 da. Oh, great. When you have a child that has delays, you now become the driver in this journey. And I think that's what you're saying, that you set expectations, Ronke, in terms of speaking to the parents and say, this is what I'm going to show you. So this is what you're going to mimic, and this is what you're going to do. So thank you for that presentation. My question though is this. When people get delays or diagnosis of delays, the first thing, especially if it's autism, they say, go get ABA. Now, I know this is not the ABA conversation because that's coming next month. So for those of you who are watching, come back, because I'm going to have the ABA therapist here. But help me out here. We hear the terminology, go get 20 hours of ABA. That's the common 20 hours. And yet we're saying early intervention is not, you didn't talk about ABA at all here. So is there any contraindication? Let me drop those words. See, I'm getting technical now. Is there any barriers or negatives or disadvantages for getting ABA in addition to getting EI? Could you also do speech therapy while you're getting EI? Could you get OT? So in other words, can you go and use your insurance to provide those additional services while you're getting EI?
These are some good questions. Wow. So ABA, I'll answer this very carefully. I love ABA, right? It is appropriate for some children. It is.
What is ABA, by the way? I'm sorry.
Yes, ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is a behavioral methodology that you all will learn about, as she just said, at our next talk, which will not be me, which will be another expert, but you will enjoy it nonetheless. But applied behavior analysis is definitely not a generic prescription, but unfortunately, it has been used as a very generic prescription. And the reason why is because it was one of two methodologies that we really knew worked with children with autism. So when the diagnosis of autism first really became established, when we first started learning how to treat children, how to educate them, it became one of the most effective at that time ways to educate children. However, as time has progressed, one thing that we've observed over time, and especially I can't speak to everyone, but in my own practice, I've observed that what autism looks like has changed drastically. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is initially, a lot of children who would enter my caseload with autism would be quote unquote in need of maximum support. They would be children who were not toilet trained, children who were nonverbal, children who did not know how to self-regulate, children who did not connect socially. These were some generic descriptions that we would see. However, fast forward almost 20 years, and we're now seeing children who are verbal, children who are social, children who talk, children who do mathematics, children who sit in a regular general education classroom, children who sit at the dinner table and eat the same food other people eat. So when you look at ABA, you can no longer use that generic prescription for every child that has a diagnosis of autism. So yes, there is a strong place for it, in my opinion, for children who are on the maximum support level. I think it's extremely important. I think though, as our wonderful Dr. G used that word, it definitely can be contraindicated for children who are progressing well without it. Right. So there is a place for children who need it, but there's also children who do not need it. And that is where having appropriate assessments by the right therapist becomes very important. And you can't just look at, oh, well, so-and-so's child down the street got 20 hours and now he's talking, and my child still only has 20 words and doesn't use ABA. But what you may not know is your child knows how to do calculus and that child doesn't know how to feed himself yet with a spoon. So you're looking at apples and oranges, and to the point that every child is different. So that is why the methodology is always different for every child.
No, that's excellent. I don't know if Aderonke, you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I actually want to piggyback on what Shawn said about having the targeted evaluators come in. Like I mentioned before, that these people will see some signs, even from observing, from the interview, and from the structured play, some signs that will make them recommend to you to proceed to see a developmental pediatrician. And also, my master's is actually in ABA option, and I've worked as a registered behavior technician. This is the point. I mean, even with my experience and with the degree that I have, I know that every child is different, but I am able to at least pinpoint one or two things from what I've learned and with my years of experience as a registered behavior technician of some signs of autism. And I will say that I've had clients that, I'm surprised to see them in early intervention services, but they really need the ABA services. But at the same time, because it's the state rule, the early intervention will still stay there. And also you get the ABA services, but it depends. Some parents will say, I've had clients who say, oh, I'm done with early intervention, let me proceed with ABA. And most of the kids who lack communication, I believe with that. So with ABA will help a lot with a couple of things, because mostly it's really structured, and with the ABA is kind of different from early intervention, because people also feel like ABA fixes a child. It doesn't fix a child as well. But the therapies that will be applied during ABA session will be different from what someone who works in early intervention will do. So depending on the child, like I mentioned before, but most times ABA is very helpful in most cases, especially with children who shows one or two signs here and there that is typical of autism. And like Shawn mentioned also, some people just feel like, okay, I'm just going to get ABA 20 hours for my child, and they don't want to, just try. I tell people early intervention is it's something that helps. Some kids, they need help. Some don't. Some need a little bit of push. So those that need a little bit of push, it doesn't hurt when you call. When early intervention doesn't work, that is when you're able to say, oh, okay, let me seek out my developmental pediatrician for further assessment, or other team members who you think can help you. But basically, ABA is strictly for kids who are on the spectrum, but kids are, I would say it's kind of overrated now, but I think.
Wow, you guys are keeping it real. I love it. Because most of us are overwhelmed, and so we hear parts and bits of information and stringing it together and using our own what we call intellect to address it. We have a comment from our Facebook page. This is Tosin, who's one of my favorite OTs. Yes, a plug in for Tosin. She said, play is the occupation of a child. In other words, it's very important for them. So caregivers need to know that children learn through play. And I think, Shawn, you agreed with that. Whereas ABA is very, very structured if it's done correctly. And by the way, not all ABA therapists know what the heck they're doing. I just need to put that out there right now.
You're running here. Did you keep any jacket?
I have seen somebody is also talking on here. Let me just mute unless you're speaking.
Get upstairs. Stop diving.
All right. So what I was saying was it's important that we know how crucial that whatever you're doing, you are getting the best. That's really what I want to comment on, is the best. I have somebody who commented on said, write down everything and see the sessions as a training. Complete agreement. Someone said it's a structured play therapy. So I'll go here as parents. I'm at the tail end of transition, and my child is transitioning into adulthood now, and I've been through the system completely. And I'll tell you, please, please, please look at this as an opportunity to learn. Prioritize the training sessions, prioritize learning, sitting there, looking what they're doing. You are going to be the best teacher you can be. And we know that that's actually the best thing we can do. So I love it how they say, we're not here to fix your child, because I know I was there. I'm like, you're here to fix them. I'm paying you, right? Which they also mentioned, because some of us, because we have our regular jobs and things like that, are not actually becomes really exorbitant when they assess the cost of early intervention. So it becomes more expensive than, say, if you did it on your own and got ABA and got speech and got OT. So oftentimes some people may place out or may not be able to do early intervention because it can be very costly. So we need to put that out there, that for the middle class, they're squeezed. Sometimes the middle class is not able to afford some things.
Please say that louder, because early intervention used to be free for everyone. And that is really a sad case that we're in right now.
So it's not always affordable that way. So this is where we always, go ahead.
Can I quickly chip something in? I mean, for most of my clients, you can tell who's paying out of pocket and who's not paying. I mean, you can tell, because they will tell you to your face, I mean, you better, what can you do with my child? Go ahead and play with, they do a lot of things. I mean, so I know Shawn can relate.
Yeah, no, it's important that people know that, because while we're promoting it here, it's like the terminology says, early intervention to bring your child to be able to progress and grow and develop. That's really what that is. Look for environment. I'm sure I was going to throw this question out there, and I know I'm monopolizing the questions, but hopefully for those who are watching, I'm putting your questions out there for you. Could the therapist do the activity with the siblings? Could it be done with the siblings included, if that's the case? Or does it have to just only be with the child alone?
It really should be with the siblings when possible, actually, because peer learning is very important. Adult directed learning is important, but peer learning is more important. Children learn by conversation with those around them that are similar to them, right? There are scenarios where that does not work. There's homes that I've been in where there's children with multiple children with disabilities. So they're not necessarily able to regulate enough to participate. But at the point, as soon as we feel one of them can regulate, we do encourage incorporation of the siblings. If there's cousins in the home, if there's other next door neighbors, even if they're open to it, we're all on board, because one of the most important things our kids with disabilities face is they often don't have social connections. And especially later on, when it's time to go to a birthday party, when it's time to go to the prom, when it's time to, and I know these things sound very far away when you're in early intervention, but those of us who have older kids on here, we can relate to that, right? We know that our kids still need those friendships. And if we build them in intentionally in early intervention, we have a chance actually at causing those relationships to last into adulthood as another form of support for them.
Excellent. So we're going to throw it out there for those who are in the Zoom room with us. If you're shy, you can put your question in here. We'll take it for you. But if you want to, unmute yourself and you want to ask your questions to our specialist here, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer it for you. So I don't know if there's any questions from anyone. Okay, so I didn't see any other questions.
Question.
Sure.
Sorry. that was messaged to me. And it says, if you miss early intervention, what's next?
If you miss early intervention,
It's like
what?
missing the age frame.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. All right, ladies, you want to answer that question?
Go for it, Shawn.
Okay, so I am also in the school system, which is why she said this to me. So every school district has a what we call a child study team, your CST, child study team. And if you have a concern about your child's development, you can write to have your child evaluated by the child study team. What you will do is you will send an email to the child study team, and you also copy the Board of Education contact on there, the Office of Special Education, Office of Special Education. So every district also has an Office of Special Education. And you also might want to copy your local principal that's in that school that's next to you, right? So most districts are still operating on the local school, the school that's next door. Not all districts are doing this anymore, which is another conversation for another day. But in the meantime, you can also copy the principal of that school. That will ensure that your email gets answered. Two, that you begin your timeline, because you do have a timeline. Once you request evaluation of your child, we must go ahead and complete that evaluation. So it's never too late to get your child services. Definitely, I say if you have a concern, write that email, write it today.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that. And I want to also add and piggyback to what she said. So up to the age of 3, and like she said, New Jersey, and so I can speak to New Jersey. Part of the law is for your child's development, and including education, academics, and also any related services in terms of their development. You're entitled to it if all the way up to the age of 21. The terminologies are broad, and once it's post 3, you're depending on what district you live in. So if you ever speak to me, I always tell you your district matters. The town you live matters, because they will put emphasis on education. And so you're going to contact Google special education in your district. And if you email and you don't get anything back, march up to the district office. Tell them you need an evaluation. Once they set up an evaluation, they will do an assessment. Part of it is all going to be an assessment. The child study team will determine what the needs are. What I will tell you is it's important that you get a formal evaluation by a developmental pediatrician or neurodevelopmental pediatrician or a neurologist. It's very important from a medical standpoint, because we're not only just concerned about speech and development, but anything else that's maybe going on with them. If you've not had an opportunity to listen to the first series, I did an overview, Dr. Marola did a second overview. Please go back and watch those, because it's so important that you get the whole complete picture. And so this is a journey for you to be the best parent you can be, to provide the best access to your kids as you can, to connect them to resources the best way you know how to. But it's so important that we do it together as a team. And that's why these wonderful ladies are here. If you have questions, you can send us email at info@mygoinc.org, or you can email me, Genevieve@mygoinc.org. Basically, we're here to make sure you get plugged in to services. There are a few parents that are on our WhatsApp groups. I have a couple of parents that have come in here, and they're here to walk you through. Don't go through this by yourself. And please, 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 I'll say this too. Don't be ashamed that your child needs help. Shawn said some children need maximum support. I'll be the first. My son needed maximum support. He still does. I'm not ashamed about that. I didn't do anything wrong. All I know is that his pathway in life is different from everybody, and we all have that. And so therefore, my job as a parent is to do the best I can to be able to help them. So we got a question from Facebook, says, there is a word and information you should include. Please share the letter to the district. So yes, we want to just make sure that when you send the letter to the district, and if you have your assessment, by the way, from your EI team, it's also actually very helpful to share that information with them, because it's basically saying you're not starting from scratch. Here's what we've been working on, and here's you can take. So important information. If your child is 3 and above, there's a document called the PRICE. Shawn mentioned that earlier. That's Parental Rights in Special Education. Google that, please, folks. If it doesn't matter what age your child is, and if your school district, a part of the IDEA law, you need to know what your parental rights are. If you don't, people trample over it. And I'll tell you that right now. So as long as you know what your rights are, you'll know what to request for. So I just want to associate, Shawn also commented here, it's a great time of the year too, because the school year is ending and everything can be ready for the fall. So remember, the school year goes on an academic from September. So if you are going to be aging out, it's really important to start now. Get to know your child study team, case managers, and they will be a blessing to you. I know this has been a lot. They've done an amazing job presenting this information. They'll be back, not to worry. They have a lot of expertise, and we wanted to leverage that today. And I hope that you've all learned something. Like I said, I've learned a lot from these wonderful ladies who have personally walked in some ways the journey, and who are helping families go through it. And they're saying they both do EI and also know ABA. So we'll be able to talk to that. And I also want to plug in, don't forget the medical component. These children, some of them are not potty trained, and they're 5 years old. That is not something you should ignore. We need to make sure we address those issues. They're not sleeping. We need to address those issues. They're not eating well. We need to address those issues. So don't just focus on just speech and talking as the only thing to focus on. Look at the whole complete picture. And that's really what we are here to support you, to make sure your child continues to grow and learn. If this session has been helpful to you, I'd love to hear back from you. Email Genevieve@mygoalinc.org or info@mygoalinc.org. And I know that these two wonderful presenters would love to hear how they did, and they're available to answer questions that you may have. If we've answered everybody else's question, I want to say thank you. This recording will be made available afterwards. It will be available on our Facebook page. We'll also have it on our YouTube as well. So please take it and share with family and friends. And remember, if your child is not walking, crawling, talking, doing the things they need to do, call the early intervention system, talk to your pediatrician, talk to your doctor, talk to somebody, talk to anybody, but please do not ignore it, because that's what we're here for. So on that note, I don't know if any last words you guys want to share. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but any last words or thoughts you want to leave behind before we close out?
Yeah, so I will implore you to, the time is now. Don't wait. It doesn't hurt, even if they say your child is not eligible. Waiting is dangerous. Go for it. Thank you.
Awesome. How about you, Shawn?
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you. I'm really appreciative of you emphasizing the medical component. Oftentimes as educators, we don't emphasize that because we're taught so much not to talk about that, honestly, because we're not doctors, but it is an extremely important part. Get the medical piece done, especially you mentioned that potty training. If your child is not potty trained by 2, there's something up. I can tell you that. So definitely take every, yes, 2.
Mine didn't get potty trained until he was 9.
Especially if you've already attempted it and it just hasn't worked. But I definitely am glad you made that it's a simple mile marker, but it's extremely important. So thank you so much for adding that piece to it. I agree with everything that is said, and just wishing everyone a prosperous path and an educational path with their child. Your child will do well. Continue to speak life into them. That's the most important part, is continue to speak life. Continue to recognize their abilities. Continue to recognize where they're going. Speak over what you want to happen, as well as you're getting all of us as partners on with you. But you as a parent have the power to just empower yourself and empower your child. So that's the most important thing I guess I could close out with.
Well said. I know that there is so much knowledge that these wonderful women have, and there's so many other specialists out there, so we don't profess to be know-it-all. And like Shawn said earlier, you, the parent, are the expert of your child. You know them in and out, and your goal here is to continue to be the best expert you can be. You partner with people, and by the way, not everybody you're going to get along with, and that's okay too. You sometimes may have to fire some people and get some new people on board. That's all right too. I know I'm being silly, but I'm making the
That's
point
true.
across that, you know, that is not, it's not a reason to give up. It's a reason to keep pressing on. So as they've said today, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. We appreciate you. And please tune in next month. We are going to have one of my also colleague and really, and Shawn had knows her, Rebecca Zegas, who is a BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. So she's going to be presenting. Coming up first, in Tosin, I haven't forgotten about you. You're going to come on next too. She's our OT on our team. We're going to have a speech person coming through too. So the goal here this year was really to focus on new parents and make sure you are empowered and have the best information you can. And really, if you have questions and you're not sure about something, I'm on WhatsApp, you can reach out. And if I don't know it, I'll find somebody who does, because that's the whole goal here is we don't know, I know there's somebody out there who does. So on that note, thank you and have a fantastic evening. Coming up, the last Thursday of the month is Empowerment Moment. And I always love to hear you guys be on there and hear some things that will encourage you. On that note, have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye now.